Welcome into the Illini Inquirer podcast. It is Jeremy Werner and Joey Wagner, and we are going to focus on football today as Illinois football gets another transfer commitment to add to the secondary. We got to meet with Corey Parker, the newest Illini defensive backs coach, and boy, there's a lot said, there's a lot learned, and we'll talk about that a little bit here. Illinois has added Brayden Trimble to the class of 2025. Haven't talked with Joey yet about that here on the podcast. Zakhari Franklin, Gavin Meyer, two transfer prospects that Illinois is going after. We got some updates on those guys as well, and Illinois in the offensive line market to try and add to the 2024 roster. It's late May, Joey. We're not even into June official visits yet, and we still have plenty to talk about with Illinois football.
We do. I was just thinking the other day, I've got a little bit of a getaway scheduled for next week, and I thought, isn't there a time usually that we do this before the June official visit season? And I think no more, Jeremy. Is there time for that? Maybe early July, which is good. Look, man, it beats trying to, I don't even know, search high and low for stories that maybe aren't the most interesting right now, right? It's nice to have content coming and being able to talk about Illinois football, Illinois basketball, and keep thinking and kind of imagining how new or potential pieces would fit into what they have.
All right, before we get into the transfers, let's start with Brayden Trimble. You have covered this recruitment, Joe. You have connections in Central Illinois, obviously from your times covering the high school beat there. And Mount Zion, when there's a good player out of Mount Zion, usually, and in Central Illinois in general, Illinois, that's when you got to land. And I remember watching Brayden Trimble last year in that 7-on-7 at the practice fields at Memorial Stadium. And we see Barry Lunny and some of these other coaches watching him. And you and I are just, he's having a day. And we're just like, they got to offer him. They have to offer him. They have to go after him. They have to prioritize him because he's probably going to get a lot more offers. Northwestern, Iowa jumped in front with offers. Illinois got him on campus in September for a visit, and that's when they offered there. And they've recruited him hard ever since. But you got to get kids like that, the best kid in Central Illinois, and they did. So just your impressions of the recruitment and the player.
It's exactly what you needed to get. I mean, you can't lose those kids, your Caden Fagans, your Aiden Lawfreys, your Brayden Trimbles, to other, especially Big Ten programs. And I never really got the sense that they were going to lose him to a Big Ten program. We knew that, Jeremy, that the proximity to home was a really big deal. We knew his family grew up watching Illinois games, attending Illinois games. We knew there was a really, really strong tie. But when you start seeing those SEC programs get involved, you think, oof, like you're going to have to ward off some really heavy recruiting here. And those SEC teams saw him because they were, in part, going to look at J.C. Anderson. And it's like, oh, by the way, this kid, maybe you haven't seen him, but he moves pretty well. And he's got a lot of traits that you would like. So be able to close that down. You don't really let him even get to the point where, or I guess you kind of make him, how do I want to put this, commits early and he doesn't take those other visits, right? Like there's no visits to Ole Miss with George McDonald or to Michigan State, which is another school that did a really good job with him. Now you've got him as a player recruiter on campus with you for this summer of official visits. And that's a big deal. He's a talented player. We knew he caught a lot of eyes at that 7-on-7 camp in Champaign, and no, they didn't offer him first. I never got the sense that was some sort of, some people wear that as a chip. Some people wear that as an, oh, really? First offers mean more to every recruit, or, it's different for every recruit. I never got the sense with him that was a big deal because they kept in contact with him. Barry Lunny Jr. did a wonderful job here. He was the one early on the Illinois staff who made those inroads, who really showed Brayden Trimble that he was a priority. And then Justin Stepp came aboard, and he followed suit on that quickly. So I thought Illinois handled this really well from the top down. They showed him how much of a priority that he is. And he's a good player. He's a good player who's going to put up good numbers as a senior, who looks, I saw some pictures of him at a camp over the week. He looks bigger. Yeah. Like he looks like he started to put on some of that mass. This coach told me, hey, he's a 3-sport athlete. Like if you're looking for big muscle mass over one summer, it's probably in your kid. But it's just a guy you had to get. He was a litmus test, one of the litmus tests of the 25 class, and Illinois did it.
Yeah, I got to say, like from the start, when they really offered him, people have asked me, like, yes, of course, you want to get every top 10 prospect in state. It's not happening. Not when you have Miami and Ohio State and Alabama. Like the SEC is coming to drink from the Chicago waters now. Like it is so over-recruited by all the powerhouses. It's really difficult for Illinois. So, yes, they are continuing to put their foot forward. But I had a couple guys that were litmus test recruits. Andre Levette was one of those. You get him before the June official visits, despite all these Power 4 offers. Michael McDonough to close down that offensive lineman who Colorado and a bunch of other Power 4 programs are recruiting. I thought that was important. Just kind of, he's that gritty interior offensive lineman that you want to build around your program. And then now to get Brayden Trimble, the best Central Illinois target, that's three guys that I thought they need to get. I think Cameron Brooks, the defensive lineman out of Homewood Foster, would be another one for me. So yes, like you might not get one of those top tier defensive linemen because all these SEC and Miami and all these programs are coming in, but there are good players in the state of Illinois, and Brett Bielema is winning more of them. They want to continue to add more of them, but those three guys I think are really good gets. And speaking of Barry Lunny, like the guy he kind of reminds me of is I've watched film of him and this transfer is Zakhari Franklin. Like he's not the fastest athlete, but he's fast enough to get over the top of people, has some separation ability, but can go up and get it. And I just think he's a really smooth athlete, catches with his hands. And given that he's a junior, a lot of like high school players like to catch the ball, with their body. Like he doesn't do that, but I think he's got a little bit more length to him, and his ability to go up and get the ball and attack the ball, I think is really good. So it's a no doubt Power 5 prospect in your backyard. You got to land those. And Brett Bielema has done that. Besides really Austin Brown out of Johnson City, from Central Illinois, like Danville to Quincy to the Quad Cities to, Champaign, Peoria, all of that, like Illinois has done really well with Brett Bielema right in their backyard of getting the guys who are no doubt Power 5 prospects like Fagan, Aiden Lawfrey, and now Brayden Trimble, but also I think evaluating well and building the relationships to do that with Matthew Bailey, Mac Rosetich. Like they found some late sleeper guys there that have done pretty well. And Declan Dooley, you can throw a punter in there as well.
Yeah, it's not an area that's recruited like Chicago, though Mount Zion is certainly right now being recruited like a very big school on Chicagoland area, but it's an area that Brett Bielema knows has to be. Are you going to get your next first team All Big Ten guy out of Central Illinois? I don't know. I mean, maybe it's not as likely as you would from Chicagoland, but you're going to get it. You're going to be able to lay a foundation by continuing to add those Central Illinois. Think about the spring ball that we just covered. Hey, Matthew Bailey is going to be back. He's going to be a guy that we think is going to be in the secondary. I think Mac Rosetich is a 2-deep guy. Aiden Lawfrey is a guy who's going to get carries. Caden Fagan's your number one running back. Like those are Central Illinois guys who, are they going to be that first round pick? Yeah, I don't know, right? It's hard to project that, but they're going to be guys who matter to winning football games. And like you can't let those guys slip. You can't let someone come in an hour from Champaign and pluck a 5-star kid or a Power 5, Power 4 prospect away from you. Like you can't do that. Now there are bigger tests coming, right? But for those kids, like you've got to land those guys. And Brett Bielema and his staff have done a good job. And you've noticed, Jeremy, even Austin Brown, like that was a miss, and it was early in this tenure of Brett Bielema. That isn't just, hey, Barry Lundy's going to come recruit Brayden Trimble, or hey, we're going to put it, the case of it was Ryan Walters on. Like it's everybody. Like those guys get the full coaching staff treatment. Not to say every prospect doesn't, but like you can feel when they're really rolling out the red carpet for those Central Illinois kids.
I mean, in Central Illinois, like they produce some good players. You think back to this, Kendrick Green was a monster get. And I think Karan Taylor, like you had to get that guy. Like he's a talented quarterback. You need talented quarterbacks. You go get that guy. It didn't work out long-term here with him, but like you go and get him. You think of Michael Manawanui, say that again. The tight end who became an NFL draft pick, right? Malik Turner became an NFL player.
Nick Broker.
Yeah, Nick like that. There's another guy.
Hunter Woodard.
Albert O that went to Missouri. Like you can't let those guys escape. And it feels like Brett Bielema isn't. Like he's going to keep the next Nick Broker. He's going to be able to keep them. Now, J.C. Anderson's a different level. Like, right?
Max Suter's different level, yeah.
We'll see the pull with two of those guys, Max Suter and J.C. Anderson, the number 2 and number 3 prospect in the state next year, 2 of the best tight ends in the country. That's a position I feel like, all right, it's time to hit a home run there. And getting Brayden Trimble certainly helps with J.C. Anderson. I think J.C. Anderson might be more likely to stay closer to home, where that's the Big Ten, Notre Dame. If it's Illinois, I don't know. I think Illinois has done a pretty good job recruiting there. That'll be tested when you get to a recruit of that level. But to keep a guy like Trimble at home, I think is a really good win. Like I think it's one of the better wins in this class so far. And to be honest with you, we could talk about this maybe before the end of the podcast. You're like, they have a really good group of official visitors coming in. Maybe it's not the 4 stars that get the headlines, but I just think it's a really good group with you're competing against really good schools. And I have confidence that Illinois is going to land a good share of these talented prospects across the board. So I think it's been a really solid start to their class, especially in state. When you throw Carson Boyd in there, along with the 3 guys I mentioned, he's from O'Fallon, Illinois. I think that's been a pretty solid start to the class.
It has been. As we talk about official visitors, you can stagger those guys for the weekends too. If you think back to the first year, the Joey Oklos, the Donovan Leary's, like they weren't really heavy on. If I remember, like one weekend, that first weekend was a huge, get your commits on campus. I think you'll see this. You've seen it since. You can stagger those guys to have maybe a Carson Boyd in the ear of insert prospect here, Brayden Trimble in the ear, Michael McDonough, Griffin Rousseau, like however you want to do that. Like you're able to really spread that out a little bit. And I think there's value in that. And Brett Bielema wants those guys to lead the way and not lead the way, but be big parts of the recruiting pitch. I'm not foolish enough to think it didn't help. Now, I think he probably already committed before the Rivals camp last weekend, but I don't think it was an accident that Brayden Trimble had pictures with Carson Boyd and Andre Levet like that. You want those relationships. I've said it on here before, and it was described to me as you want as many different ties bonded as you can, and whether that's player to player or the Trimble family to the Boyd family, however it kind of like you want all of that kind of locked in together. So being able to spread these guys out over the course of the month of June, I think is something that they'll do, and I think it's something that could be helpful for them.
Yeah, I guess the way I look at recruiting, because I'm sure people are listening, sitting there going, you guys are celebrating a class that's number 42 in the country, 13 in the Big Ten. And the Big Ten
people are saying that?
Yes, of course they are.
Yes.
And I understand it to a certain degree. And Lauren Tate, whenever I go on the air talking about football recruiting, always brings this up. Well, Ohio State and Michigan, I know they're in the Big Ten. I'm not comparing myself to them. Like I don't think that's in the realm of possibility. Like within the next 5 years, that's not, you're not in the same world as them. Okay. My goal is to get to that next tier. Can you be in that second group of 5 in the Big Ten? You're not going to be in the top 5. Can you be in that second group of 5? And I think Illinois has the potential to do that. They aren't there yet. Can they get there with this talent? If you develop it right, if you evaluate it right. But I do think they're getting in better battles. Then you got to coach it, right? And I feel like the offense obviously took strides last year. The defense took a step back. The defense a couple of years ago, obviously really well coached, a lot of talent there. But I do feel like they're recruiting the guys that are in the battles to potentially elevate into that group if they develop well, if they had the right transfers. But some big guys coming in later next month is Charles Bass out of East St. Louis, a 4-star composite guy. The composite has him top 10. We have him top 15 in 24/7 sports. It's Illinois and Arkansas, it feels like right now in a battle. I think that's a big one. A 4-star composite running back, John Forster. Illinois has recruited that position pretty dang well here recently with 2 4-stars in Fagan and Khalil Valentine in the composite. And then defensive front, Joey. I feel like it's really important to add some talent up front because of what you've lost at outside linebacker in the underclasses. Like it's going to be a strong position this year with all the upperclassmen, but losing Josiah Knight and losing Calvin Smith really hurts you long-term. So they got to find some outside linebackers, and Clint Sinham's kind of playing catch up here, but he's got Nicholas Clayton coming on campus, Tyrone Burris out of Indianapolis. Those are 2 highly recruited outside linebackers. And then they got 4 or 5 defensive linemen coming in, and I know they're not the 4-stars, but they're all really good Power 5 prospects. So they need to get some work done up front, but they got a lot of talented players coming in.
Yeah, I think this official visit season, just given what they've locked up already and how they've built this 25 class, it feels like the defensive front season, right? Like that. Maybe we've talked about that in other years. I'm sure we have. But I feel good about long-term where they have in the secondary. I feel long-term running back. You look at quarterback, and obviously Boyd would factor into that. You go down the list. It's like defensive front. Like it's time to really continue to stack. I thought there were some good players in the class of 2024. You need to develop those guys. You need to stack those. And, yeah, outside linebacker went from a position that we really like the immediate, we really like the long-term, and now you do have to do some replacing in the long-term at outside linebacker. But, yeah, like that to me is a story.
It's weird, though. Like we're talking about Illinois, like skill positions recruiting pretty well. that has not been the case. Like we're used to kind of offensive line being strength with Brett Bielema, but I do think, obviously with the DB cell, I think they're getting some talented DBs, but they have that with the NFL. But Barry Loney's offense and getting some guys drafted at running back, at wide receiver, at tight end. We'll see what they do in tight end in this class, but you can tell, Joey, like it's resonating a little bit more when you have an actual passing attack that can do things.
It is. And I think like even for the way that we talk about it and the way that people observe it, like I think we do have to look at like what that cell looks like. Because like I think when you see a Devin Witherspoon, a Sidney Brown, a Quan Martin, like we do think that Illinois in 24, maybe you didn't get as much out of that cell as you would hope.
I think in the portal that's true. I don't know about prep because I think really highly of Vernon Woodward. So
that's right. But I think maybe the better way to put it is when you see all that, you think, oh, the 5-star is going to be kicking down the door to come to Illinois or any program, right? Like I do think you have to step back and realize like you can still sell that in 2025 and 2026.
Let's be honest, the 5-stars cost a lot of money. Right.
They do. But like to sell that in the prep recruiting, like it's not just, well, after the 24 class, it doesn't matter. Right. Like there's still time that you can sell those pitches. I think consistency helps in those pitches. And hey, we had him. And if Terrence Brooks develops in the way that they hope, you would put him in that conversation. And like, we'll talk about Corey Parker. He's going to sell Quinyon Mitchell. So like, I think that like, it's not as immediate, but it also lasts longer than just one recruiting cycle. And maybe you would have liked to see more of those 4-star guys either on campus or commit. But like, I don't think the door gets shut either. I think consistency is really important there.
And when the guys produce in the NFL, the cell gets better.
Devin Witherspoon, right? Sidney Brown, Quan Martin.
I think that's almost as important because like I would assume who people knew, All-American, all that, but like when you start starting games and playing really well at the Chicago Bulls, that might help even more. Like than him playing well at Illinois, him playing well in the NBA as well. So going to be a huge month ahead for Illinois football recruiting, and we'll have much more on that. But we finally had a complete staff. Illinois hires Corey Parker. We talked about it a little bit last week about what he could bring, given that he developed, Quinyon Mitchell, the first-round draft pick. It's a heck of a sell for Illinois to cornerbacks to say, hey, our coaching staff has developed the last 2 highest drafted cornerbacks, Devin Witherspoon in 2023 and Quinyon Mitchell now in 2024. Obviously, a longtime Michigan coach in the high school ranks, Joey, 2 years at Toledo. So he's got the connections in Michigan and Detroit and a little bit in Ohio and Florida. But we got to talk with Corey Parker today, and boy, he's got the gift. He's got the gift of talking. So I'll give you the floor. What were your impressions of our 30-plus minutes with Corey Parker today at the lectern?
I know you mentioned this on the message boards. So like a lot of people watching were impressed, and they should have been because he's a guy who brings a lot of energy. He's a guy who like you can feel the passion. You can feel how much like personal relationships matter with him. And he was like shouting at times. I'm like, oh my gosh, dude, I like kind of a small room, but okay. He said,
you're a traitor at one point. You got to watch things.
He's talking to you, if you remember right. But like there was I found like, yeah, that's going to get a lot of attention if you got it on in the background and you're doing whatever. Like if you listen to there was a lot of depth to what he said. He just happened to say it very loudly and very passionately. Like this is a guy, relationships matter. Like leaving Toledo, he was there for 2 years, had otherwise not a single solitary tie to Toledo. But like that was hard for him because Jason Candle believed in him and that defensive coaching staff believed in him. And those players allowed him to come in and coach them. And like, he said that was tough. And like his wife was a big part of, hey, we believe in you, go. Like this is what the job is. And he says the same when he left high school. For 13 years, River Road was not really a destination spot for high school college coaches before him.
He's a very different personality, but his story reminds me of Corey Patterson.
That's right,
because
yes.
Corey went to Trinity, and that wasn't much of a football program at the time. And to be honest with you, I mean, after Corey Patterson left, that school shut down. Like River Rouge was in danger of getting shut down before he came down there, and football kind of infused it. he and his wife was a part of that school as well, really gave that school some life. And, the football program can be an engine for some of those things. It can be the front porch of a school, as some smart athletic directors like to say, and it can keep people involved and help people graduate, right? Like if they have the sports carrot in front of them. So he made such a big impact there, and that's undeniable. He's an infectious personality. You can't help but be impressed by him. And, sometimes you get up there, bluster and all that. Like he's got track record too. I just think he's going to do really well developing relationships with the current players, which can help get the most out of them. And I think he's going to be a hit in recruiting, both with his connections and with parents, because he talks like a parent. He talks like someone who knows that part of his role is not just developing a football player, but developing a man and developing them better as men. I know these are all like cliche things. That's going to get more out of the player if you have those kind of relationships. And that's really important to Brett Bielema and his entire staff. Of course it is with Aaron Henry as well. But he's also got a track record, Joey, of developing a first-round draft pick, good defensive players who don't commit many penalties, and the DBs had really good PFF grades at Toledo. So I think he's a really good hire in a silo. My one question with all of this is, you have a really impressive, when we talk to them, defensive staff. I think they're really, really impressive people. There's not a lot of play calling experience there. And that's why I think it's really on Brett Bielema to make sure that Aaron Henry and that defense take a step forward this year and putting the players in positions to succeed, getting better players, which we will talk about here in a second with the DB room. But I wanted somebody with maybe a little more play calling experience like David Gibbs to do that. But I do think Corey Parker was a strong hire, knowing now what he brings, what his history is, and now being able to meet him. You can't help but be impressed.
No, you can't. And to your point, we said when Aaron Henry got promoted, like, I don't think Brett Bielema is going to let a defensive coordinator fail.
Yep.
It wasn't a great start a year ago. I mean, the stats bear that out. The eye tests bear that out. The win-losses, like everything bears that out. But I think it is on Brett Bielema to help usher Aaron Henry, help this offseason. It was probably a really big offseason. Why'd you do this? Why'd you do, like, you've got to have that conversation to come back. And it does. I still believe Brett Bielema won't let a defensive coordinator fail, but they have to improve. And I think he's going to have a hand in that improvement. One other thing about Corey Parker, he was talking today. He said when he first got the call from Brett Bielema, he was in Florida. Illinois has a footprint there. They want to continue to have a footprint there. He obviously has ties in the state of Michigan from his time as a high school coach. Terrence Jamison is working like crazy to get in the state of Michigan. He has ties in Ohio because of his time at Toledo. That is a place that Illinois wants to continue to have a hand in. He talked about New Jersey. We've seen Illinois go to Jersey. Like, it's what hit me when he was talking. Like, all these places that he has ties, and I think he'll be just fine creating relationships in the state of Illinois. If you watch him speak, he'll be okay on that front. But like, to have those good relationships in states that Illinois is either in and wants to continue to add to, or really starting to strengthen their spot, like, that's appealing to me. And that was probably appealing to Brett Bielema.
It's just the all interview defensive staff, by the way. Most of this staff, like for us as media, are fantastic. They are great to talk to. They're really impressive guys. So we'll see how it all translates. But I do think he's got credibility in that defensive back room, right? I mean, this is a crew that knows Aaron Henry developed all those draft picks along with Ryan Walters, and now you get a guy who developed Quinyon Mitchell. I think they're going to listen to that guy and what he has to say, given what they've been able to do. So, he talked about Terrence Brooks. I asked him about Terrence Brooks. He said he's got the physical tools. Now we need to shape it, and he's changing schemes and changing kind of philosophies. Can be much more press man. But he's talking about the length, the size, the physicality, the twitchiness. It's all there. But I thought it was also big that he brought up Terrence Brooks. Like, you got to build up relationships with the rest of your team now. I know you're coming in as a transfer with your goals, but we all got to do it as a team. So you got to build up that credibility as well. So I just thought it was really, really good insight. Yeah,
I'm trying to think what else I took. The you're a trader thing. He was really talking to give some background. I know not everyone's going to watch this 30-minute special here. Like, he was talking about, like, hey, you didn't do this right with your eyes or your hips, or your fundamentals were lacking. Like, you're kind of turning your back on your team if you're trying to be self. Like, that's to summarize more or less what he was trying to say. And there's also a really good question about like how his time in high school maybe helped him forge those relationships. And to kind of cliff notes that he said people would come in and poach his junior high players before they got to high school. It's just no more of that. So we went and coached junior high. And if this kid was into Marvel, Corey Parker was into Marvel, right? Like you've got to be able to find some sort of middle ground to share interests with these guys to build that relationship and not want them run off to a different high school or whatever that case would be. Like everyone can say relationships are important, right? And there's a surface level like, hey, he did feel like he had a plan, and like his way of building relationships felt genuine and detailed and thought out and not just coach speak.
Right. But like, I mean, anybody put yourself in any kind of situation. Like if you know the person, doesn't mean you gotta be best friends with them. But if you actually want to get to know them, like, and know it makes them tick, like, aren't you gonna work a little harder for that person? Aren't you gonna like believe in that person or listen to what they're saying a little bit more? So I think that's translatable to everything that we think of. All I'm saying is that defensive back room, you bet when they got those 6 a.m. practices, Joey, they better have a little bit of caffeine in them because their coaches are going to bring the energy.
Yeah, look, and hey, that's not for every defensive back. There's going to be some recruits who are on the phone like, no, thank you.
It's for most defensive backs, though. Those guys are wired.
But look, you can say that about any coach in the world, right? Like this personality is not going to mix with every single recruit, but you got two very similar voices in terms of energy, personality with Aaron Henry and Corey Parker. And if that's your jam, that's good for Illinois.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's probably more the position groups, but like the vibe in that DB room with Aaron Henry and Corey Parker bouncing off the walls compared to like Robbie Disher, probably a little laid back, and then Bart Miller just offensive line. Like it's just different vibes. But I think that kind of goes with the position. Wide receivers, you're probably feeling pretty good about yourself, and I think Justin Stepp kind of reflects that as well. So
it's been an impressive, like what Brett Bielema's done. There's some heavy turnover again this year. I like on paper, I like our interactions with the hires. I understand people listening to this don't really care if Corey Parker or Clint Senham or Archie McDaniel are the nicest guys on planet Earth if the team is 4-8, right? Like that, or Justin Stepp. But like, I think on paper in a vacuum, it still has to come together on the field. But man, I think it's been an impressive group that Brett Bielema has brought in.
I think that plays on the recruiting trail, especially. But I do think it plays in the relationships and developing guys. But yeah, I mean, people didn't love Aaron Henry's press conferences of him being rah-rah when they were losing games and giving up 30 points. So like for me, it's all about, can you get the most out of your players? And going back to defense, you got to get more out of them. You got to get more out of them. And the scheme has to put these players in the best position to succeed. And we got to see that out of Aaron Henry and his group moving forward. All right. Speaking of the DBs, Illinois adds another defensive back transfer. Ohio transfer Tory Cox commits to Illinois. Tory Cox Jr., his dad, played in the NFL for 6-7 seasons with the Tampa Bay Bucks, was a returner, also a really good cornerback. So, Joey, what do you think of this addition? A 2-year starter as an underclassman in the MAC, which is not the best conference, but obviously an FBS conference. So he adds to a group that includes now Terrence Brooks from Texas, Tyler Strain, who we think has a chance to start, and Xavier Scott, who was all Big Ten honorable mention last year.
Yeah, I think if you're setting your expectations for Tory Cox and Terrence Brooks is the same, I would maybe reevaluate those. I like what he brings as a guy who's experienced. He's not tall. He's 5'8". That to me, and I think to you, probably screams nickel, which would be more than likely, we think, competing with Tyler Strain. Obviously, Xavier Scott has played there last year and late in the 2022 season. But I like the depth piece to it. I like the experience piece to it. He's physical. I mean, his tackling, his PFF numbers are good. He tackles well. You like to see that in a slot if that's ultimately where he ends up, and I think that would make sense for that to be the case. But it's not the Terrence Brooks level, right? It's not, no doubt, number one starter, but he's a guy that I feel more comfortable if there's an injury, and there are injuries at cornerback. They're like, hey, I would rather have a guy who's come in and started 23 games in FBS football than maybe have to look at a freshman or a JUCO transfer who probably isn't ready for that moment or would struggle to be ready for that moment to have to throw in the fire. We've seen that not go very well. So an experienced guy, and if he pushes Xavier Scott, if he pushes Tyler Strain, that's great, right? Like that's great news. But I do like the addition, especially from a depth standpoint.
Yeah, I think we went into this offseason like Illinois for 18 months had really not addressed cornerback from a and used the Devin Witherspoon sell to what I think they could have. Caleb Patterson as a JUCO addition, I thought was fine. Like he's got a really good physical tools and an interesting developmental prospect, was a top 50 JUCO guy. But then you kind of went Prince Ford and Chase Canada, and Canada can be good as well. But it's just you're going with a lot of unknown there, and it just felt like they thought Xavier Scott could be good. He was. They thought Tavion Nicholson could be good. He was when he wasn't committing crucial penalties. And Tyler Strain and Zach Toby. And like, it was a lot of unknown to throw out there. And I think it came back and hurt them last year, not being more aggressive for a top tier defensive back talent wise. They got that in Terrence Brooks. They got that potential number one guy or 1B guy with Xavier Scott, because I think Scott's got that kind of potential. But they got two, no doubt, starting Big Ten corners that I think can start on most Big Ten teams, right? And then you move Tyler Strain to your 3 corner instead of maybe your 2. But still, after losing Zach Toby and Tavion Nicholson, who went to Louisville, so it's not like he's going to some bad program, you had a need for a 4th. Like one injury away from throwing Chase Canada into the starting lineup or Caleb Patterson, and I wouldn't have been comfortable. Yes, or Jaheim Clark. So I wouldn't have been comfortable with that. Like you needed another experienced guy, and to get somebody that is undersized, that is his flaw, but has physicality, has made plays on the ball, has NFL lineage like Terrence Brooks. Like, I think there's a really solid depth addition. If he can be the Clayton Bush of the cornerback room this year, I think it's a really good addition. Clayton Bush was really important for Illinois last season at some points of the season. Like he became a starter for you after Matthew Bailey goes out. That's how I think of Tory Cox. Like he can come in and give me a solid third piece of that cornerback room, whether it's he wins the job out of camp or he has to come in for injury. So he comes from a winning program too. Ohio has been a really good football program. You got Denzel Daxon from out of there. So I like this addition. It's not going to make or break the season, but I do think when depth becomes important, and it happened earlier than we thought at safety last year, like having guys like this is huge. So we'll see if he can win the starting spot, but even if he doesn't, I think this is a nice depth addition for Illinois.
Yeah, and minimum. I mean, it kind of reminds me of some of the defensive linemen. We've like if Anichi Sledge can push T-Rod Edwards, right, or whatever. If
and Tory Cox, eligibility for Cox, by the way, I just want to.
That's right, yeah. And if he can push Tyler Strain, like you want that because you want guys to feel like I think about, and it's not apples to apples. I think about Bart Miller talking like, man, Julian Pearl and Isaiah Adams knew no one was really pushing them last year, and that's not to say those guys took plays off. Isaiah Adams is a draft pick. Julian Pearl is going to be in a training camp, but like I do feel like it's different when you know somebody is right there. When you know that all right, this isn't a forever deal for me. Like I've got to really step it up here. So I do think that matters. I know it sounds cliche, but it does matter. And if Tory Cox can be that, if he can be a special teams guy, if he doesn't beat out Tyler Strain, if he can go be a physical gunner, it's great. Like that's great. You can't have enough of those guys, and I'm sure he understands both the opportunity and the potential role that he has. Like, it just feels like a fit that makes sense. I love the Clayton Bush of the cornerback room comp because I think it's fair, and I think you can see how Clayton Bush's addition impacted this team last year.
And if you look at this cornerback room, Joey, all those top 4 guys have another year of eligibility after this one. So Strain, Scott, Brooks, Cox all would have another year of eligibility. So you could roll it into 2025 potentially, right? So like you think of the defense, you're going to lose a lot up front next year with Seth Coleman out of eligibility, Dennis Briggs, Ezekiel Holmes, General Hunt, T-Rod Edwards. But maybe you can bring that back 7 back, Dylan Rosiak, Kenen Odeluga, James Krutz, all those guys another year, Matthew Bailey, Miles Scott. Maybe that could be the strength if you have a bounce back year this year.
Yeah, I agree with that. And then again, that's why it does feel like defensive front, to circle back to the conversation from earlier, this summer, next offseason, like it's still something, some of those emptier recruiting classes, 2020 through 2022, is that right? 2022, you're starting to see some of that come to fruition, and where you've got to be more active in the transfer portal.
All right, let's hit down another couple of transfers because Illinois has what, from our count, 3 open scholarships remaining. And we believe those 3 spots would be for 1, a defensive lineman, 2, a wide receiver. This is no particular order. and 3, an offensive lineman. So Zakhari Franklin has been very, very quiet. It's been a very quiet recruitment from what I understand. Zakhari Franklin really wants it that way. Obviously, for people that don't know, was a stud at UTSA along with Barry Lunny, was there for 2 years with him, played another year, and is the active leader in the NCAA in receiving yards. Visited Illinois last week, and our Matt Zenitz from 24/7 Sports reports today. The first thing we've really heard about Zakhari Franklin since his Illinois visit is that he is visiting Washington. Obviously, different coaching staff with Fish there now. Jed Fish coming from Arizona to fill Kalen DeBoer's spot after DeBoer comes to Alabama. Joey, how concerned are you about Zakhari Franklin visiting elsewhere?
I mean, I don't know that I ever thought Zakhari Franklin was only going to visit Illinois. Like, we didn't hear there were no other scheduled visits. And I think you and I maybe looked at that like, okay, there should be, between the familiarity with Barry Lunny, the opportunity presented, the fact that, you know, we didn't know a lot of other visits were on the table, that like there should have been some cause for optimism. And I still think that's the case. I don't think him visiting Washington takes Illinois out of the picture, but like, he's also a talented player at a position that, like, how many guys can come in the spring portal window like Zakhari Franklin and make that kind of impact? So of course he was going to visit other schools. We'll see how that plays out. But like, I'm not surprised. I think obviously he didn't get that commitment when he was on his visit. And so like, there's always a degree of concern where a kid leaves and goes and visits somewhere else. So like, that exists, but I'm not surprised that he's going to other programs. I think that was a plan coming into the Illinois visit.
I mean, obviously, I'd rather see him committed to Illinois right now and not take a visit elsewhere. So there's a little bit more concern today than there was before we learned this information. But there has been an absence of knowledge about this recruitment. Like, it is really hard to find much information about this. I do think on paper, Illinois fit makes a ton of sense with Barry Lunny, with the opportunity. Like, he's going to step into a starting role right away. There's another part of this that I do want to bring up, and he's got to take, from what I understand, one more course to graduate and get his degree, which is really important when transferring, because most schools like the University of Illinois say, hey, you can't just take one course or one semester and get a University of Illinois undergrad degree. So once you're a graduate, it's much easier. Like, you can get in, you can take whatever graduate program you really like, as long as you get into school. But it's far easier to do that. From my understanding, probably has to do that anywhere. But for Illinois, he knows the playbook. He knows Barry Lunny's scheme. But I will say, like, Jed Fish, man, like, I get vibes of like Matt Rule with him, because like, wait, this guy came out of nowhere, took over this program, didn't know really who his name was. And then all of a sudden, like, you turn him from a 1-win program to like a 10-win program in a couple of years. And now he's got the Washington job. And he had a prolific passing attack at Arizona. Just had Jacob Cowling get drafted, I believe, in the 4th round, was their number 2 wideout. Their top wideout, McMillan, from last year, is a projected 1st-round draft pick next year. So he can sell that. Washington obviously lost a lot of receivers to the NFL draft. There are 3 starters, including Rome Odunze, to my Chicago Bears. But that is a prolific passing attack that he can sell. Now, Washington's added 3 transfers already, one really good one from Cal, but they do have a good sell. Now, Illinois, I think, has one they can sell there with Casey Washington, obviously, and Isaiah Williams being an all Big Ten player and just the relationship with Lunny. But this is real competition. Like, Washington and Jed Fish have a good sell.
Yeah, I mean, Illinois might not get the kid. I don't know. If someone tells you they know what Zakhari Franklin is thinking, probably should meet that with some skepticism, because he's been intentionally quiet here. But it is a good sell. And it's a Big Ten sell.
It's been difficult for national guys to get stuff on Zakhari.
Yeah, that's right. And like, it's good. You're in the Big Ten. You're a good passing attack in the Big Ten. It's very like the sells. The difference is at Illinois, you've got Barry Lunny, and you've got a very specific history of success there. But Washington's a good program, and like that's competition, and we'll see if there are other visits. I don't know. I know you don't know. Like, maybe there are other visits in the cards.
I think we went into this offseason thinking, like, wide receiver, yeah, you'd like to. If you can upgrade, you can upgrade. And Zakhari Franklin would be a huge upgrade. And I think it's not the biggest position of need, in my opinion, based on talent. but the lack of experience is a concern for me. And the spring game, one of our only chances to see it, only kind of heightened that because Ashton Hollins kind of struggled a little bit. Malik Elzy put up good numbers, but also had several drops. So that's concerning outside of Pat Bryant. And when I have Luke Altmaier, and I think an offensive line is going to be able to protect him, and you got Pat Bryant, like you want to make the most out of this passing attack. And I think Zakhari Franklin can do that. So I think he's kind of that elevator of this offense. Of if they had a guy like him on top of the running back room that we think can be pretty good, especially if Caden Fagan and Aiden Lawfrey stay healthy, that this offense could be a real strength of this team. So I get why people are so invested in this recruitment. Even if we don't think receiver, like we think they have the talent there, just the known quality of what Zakhari Franklin is feels like it'd be huge for this offense.
Yeah, again, it wasn't a conversation that was front of mind for wide receiver entering the portal, and he became available and became very front of mind because he's really talented. I guess my question would be, and we'll see how this looks if they don't land him, how seriously do they pursue other portal wide receivers, or if this is this a case of it's Franklin or we just roll with what we've got at this point in time? I don't know that answer. I do think there's an appeal. I do think there's an appeal for a more experienced guy if you can get that player. But I am curious, how they approach that. Because I don't know that answer right now.
It's getting late on the clock, Joey. They report next week to come to campus. Now, it would take Zakhari Franklin more time with finishing up school, but do they think they could get a guy better than Alex Kapka-Jones or better than Ashton Hollins? Like, probably not getting one better than Malik Elzy, right? Elzy just needs the playing time to get consistency, all those things. Are you getting somebody better than you think Colin Dixon could be? I don't know. Like, Zakhari Franklin is that guy. So that's why I agree with you. It's a fascinating thought of, do they have somebody else? Do they go and get another body, or do they try and add to a different position and just add some depth somewhere else? It'll be fascinating.
I'm scanning through the portal right now for uncommitted.
Not many.
There's not a lot of guys that you would look at and say, it feels like a guy who could change the game, at least that we know that or suspect maybe that Illinois would have an in with. We could be playing it quiet. We don't know, but I just wonder if it's a Zakhari or bust, for lack of better terms.
At that point, I'd rather just give, unless it's a proven starter at the FBS level, I'd rather give those reps to Malik Elzy, Colin Dixon, Ashton Hollins, and that crew, right?
Yeah, I agree. But there's risk involved there. There's risk involved that they can take that step, and what if you need the offense to put up a ton of points? So it's an interesting needle to thread.
Is there a guy out there outside of Zakhari Franklin that actually does that for your offense? Like, I'd rather deal with the growing pains early in the season with some of those younger guys, because the ceiling of it, both this year and maybe making them happy for the long term, like, I think that could be more important than adding a guy who can give you 20 catches for 200 yards.
I'm 100% with you there. And again, it's late in the clock. If this were a conversation we were having in, I don't know, when did the portal close? Like, let's say mid-March, early April, whatever that time frame was for spring windows, probably mid-April, I think, is, if I remember correctly.
May 1st.
Then maybe we're having a different tone to this, but you're right. These guys are getting there quick, and you want to get them involved in the summer workouts. And there's obviously a little bit more instruction they can do now in the summer than compared to 2 years ago. You want those guys involved in that. So we'll see. I just don't know that it's one of those who's next. I think if it's not him, maybe you try to see if you can add another position at defensive line, or you maybe find a walk-on, say, hey, congrats to you here. I don't know. I don't have that answer right now.
All right, defensive line, they definitely are going to add somebody there. They have hosted Gavin Meyer from Wyoming. Our Matt Zenit said USC sounds to be trending there. Cal is in the mix. Wisconsin was in the mix. Haven't heard a lot on them with Gavin Meyer, a Wisconsin native. Felt like if they really want him, they could. USC is desperate for defensive line help. But Illinois, he seems to be the priority. But they also hosted Anthony James a couple weeks ago. And his other considerations right now are Marshall and Eastern Washington. Really good prospect pedigree. Gavin Meyer is the better option for next year. And obviously that takes precedent on the defensive line where you need help immediately. So you add a Gentle Hunt. If you can add Gavin Meyer, feeling a lot better about your 2024 defensive line. But Anthony James has 4 years of eligibility left, had offers from a bunch of SEC and Big 12 schools, 6'5", 280, ridiculous arm length, and a little bit twitchier than he was as a prep prospect. So I still think he'd be a good addition. I don't know what impact he would make next year. He's probably going to need some development, had a shoulder injury last year, but they will add, I believe, a defensive lineman, one of those two.
Yeah, I agree with that. And they need to. And Gavin Meyer would make sense for a guy that you could put right now next, on that starting line with insert nose tackle of choice, however that plays out between Gentle Hunt and T.R. Edwards. Those seem to be the two front runners, and Dennis Briggs. But there is some appeal with James with the long-term options there. As we just talked about, a defensive front that you need to continue to add some longer-term possibilities there. So they are going to add one. They are going to add one. I will say, we've kind of gotten hints of vibes here and there. I don't know if you have, if you've maybe observed it the same. I have kind of noticed a little bit of confidence coming from the Smith Center in terms of this spring portal window, which, to be honest, I don't know what you and I had our expectations set on going in. They've done a good job to this point, but I have noticed a little bit more confidence. They're getting some good players on campus. Maybe that's where that's coming from. I don't know. Maybe I'm misreading that or making too much out of some of the little nuggets we've seen or heard.
I think Gentle Hunt and Tory Cox Jr. are solid depth additions. We've seen those kind of additions. Terrence Brooks is a different kind of addition, and they made in the spring. So that gives you some confidence. And if you can add Zakhari Franklin to that, or a Gavin Meyer to that, I think Meyer could be a solid start. I don't know if he's an NFL caliber player, but just another good defensive lineman in the rotation, I think would really help. That would be a next level. That would be a heck of a spring. I saw some grades of what the transfer portal was from another outlet, I believe it was, that had Illinois, and it was midterm grade of the spring portal, and they had Illinois to C-, and then they land Terrence Brooks and Gentle Hunt and now Tory Cox. And if you had Zakhari Franklin to that, that far exceeds my expectations. You had another defensive lineman to that, far exceeds that. And then they're also in the hunt for offensive line depth. You lose Andrew Dennis. It's a big long-term loss because I think he's a starter potentially by his second or third year at Illinois and potentially an NFL player. So that's a nice win for Michigan State to get him back under a new staff. But instead of trying to replace that, because I feel like they have some good prospects on the interior. I like TJ McMillan. I think Brandon Henderson could play tackle or guard. Zafir Stewart coming in. They got some good.
Hansen.
Yeah, they got some good guard bodies there, but still could use some more tackle depth because right now it's J.C. Davis, Melvin Priestley, who probably is more ideally a guard, but will probably play tackle this year. Henderson could play there. And it's Maunus Moeller, who probably isn't quite ready even yet in his third year of college here after coming from overseas. So they're hosting Kellen Francis, a JUCO offensive lineman out of Princeville, Illinois, Joey.
309, stand up.
No offers out of Princeville, which is 1A football, I would imagine, right?
That I don't.
2A?
You keep chat. It's 1 or 2A, but now I'm going to look while you chat.
Right.
Hold up.
He just got off from Houston and just took an official visit to Arkansas. And he told our Arkansas site, Trey Biddy and Danny West do a great job over there, that he will be visiting Illinois later this week. So I don't know if he's a guy that's going to play this year. He played 1 year of JUCO. Looked pretty good on his film. Played guard last year, but played tackle during the spring. That's some impressive spring film. But just another guy that maybe could compete for the job next year when J.C. Davis is gone and Melvin Priestley goes into his senior year, and you need somebody to compete with Brandon Henderson, whoever it is.
It is 1A. I don't know what you just said, but I can tell you that Princeville. But I know a little bit what you said. Having another long-term tackle option when – look, I still think – and I'm not a guy who is, avoid the portal, but there are positions in the portal that maybe you don't want to have to hunt for yearly because they're costly positions. And left tackles are in that mold. So if you can have guys on your roster who could come up and take that mantle, I think there's a lot of value to that. Now, at the end of the day, if they're not good enough, you've got to go get in there. And you've seen that with Illinois this year, at both the tackle spots. But I do think there's value to have a guy who's had some JUCO time, can come in, get some of those reps. Offensive line takes time. Defensive line takes time. That's not new information. So to have maybe a low-pressure season with Bart Miller, right, to learn the system, to learn how he does things, I think there's a ton of value. And then, hey, go compete. And if we don't think you're ready, we'll add a body and see how that plays out. But I do think having as many guys there as you can to not have to rely on some of those very costly positions, 2 straight years or 2 out of 3, however it comes to look at, like, that's important because left tackles are expensive. The market isn't changing where left tackles are going to get less expensive. Right tackles are also, they have a price tag. So that's an interesting thing. And but Bielema prides himself on development, whatever level that looks like. If it's JUCO, we'll see how that plays out.
We're 10 days away from most of this team being here for the summer, and they're still making additions to the roster. It's kind of a wild time. Just, really under the gun here of making the final additions to the 2024 roster. So it's a big couple weeks ahead, Joey, to see who they can close on and just kind of put the finishing touches on their roster, because if it's a piece like Zakhari Franklin or Gavin Meyer, that could make a big impact on what you're doing next year. And then you had some potential depth pieces with Anthony James or Kellen Francis, that can make a difference in the fall.
It can. And look, I also want to point, depth pieces don't always move the needle from people outside of but they do when they start 3 games because you're on a red hot bender at the end of a season, right? I mean, depth pieces in May aren't sexy, but they sure look good in late October or November when you really need them. So that's kind of a reminder I want to put out there that just because we don't have X player, Tory Cox, no doubt starter week 1, doesn't mean by week 8 Tory Cox isn't a guy you're sure as heck glad you called.
I mean, think about last year. I think the shinier additions outside of Luke Altmaier was Demetrius Hill and Nicario Harper, and 2 FCS All-Americans, right? You also added, John Paddock obviously came up huge for that team with 2 wins there. Denzel Daxon, he was a mid-year one, but that ended up being a really important piece. He was a good quality nose tackle.
As important as any transfer last year not named Luke Altmaier, Denzel Daxon. And
so was Clayton Bush. He's your best safety last year. In my opinion, I thought maybe Miles Scott was better, but Miles Scott felt like he had 2 really good bookends of the season, but the middle of it, Clayton Bush felt like the better safety for most of the season. So that felt like a big addition just to have a serviceable, veteran, experienced guy back there. So didn't change the season most likely, but he helped you. And some of these guys can certainly help you.
Yeah, it may not have changed it, but it also didn't tank it when it could have been tanked. Right. Yeah. So
playing a freshman.
And freshmen are second, right? Because if you're a fan, you've heard of this freshman since they were 16 years old as a however many star kid, local, whatever, not local, been on a visit. You've kind of heard names for a while, and you get attached to those guys, and you should. That's what makes college athletics fun and great, and watching the development of these players over time. And maybe you would want to see a freshman in instead of a Clayton Bush, right? Maybe people would have been like, Sabor Kareem, it is time for him. And he's a talented player. He's a 4-star player, composite 4-star player. But in that moment in time, he had a ton fewer snaps in his career than Clayton Bush. And Clayton Bush, not saying Sabor Kareem would have tanked, in that moment, but Clayton Bush at least kept the floor somewhere, right? That. And there's when you're trying to get that freaking 6th, that's what it is right now. Get that freaking 6th win. You need someone to keep the floor somewhere around the same spot that it is, even if that ceiling that you want to see 2 years from now is a little further away. That floor right now for this program is so important because that 6th is so important.
Yeah. All right. Any final thoughts, Joey, before we get out of here?
I don't. Can you hear? Oh, God. Hold on.
Do you have your NCAA football game?
Did you just hear a bunch of audio?
No.
Dude, I got to get new headphones. Every time I try to adjust these, I play old recordings to my phone now that I have this Mac, I can airdrop, and it's just me screaming because there's music at Memorial Stadium going, and it just feels like absolute chaos.
Last time we had one of these things where I could hear audio playing over everything, and you couldn't hear it. You just heard me glitching up or something, and I was like, "Oh, thank God," because it was some advertisement for a minute. It's what?
The answer for me is just over the head headphones that you have, or better. Anyway, no, I have not pre-ordered NCAA yet. I'm waiting. I haven't got your credit card number to put that in, so I'm waiting for that.
Probably write that off, to be honest with you, because I'm going to have you write some stories off it. I want a review. I want full breakdown of the NCAA football game because I'm living through you, Joey. I haven't played video games in like, besides our trip to Omaha, which was not a pleasant experience for me.
You were mad. I've never seen you that mad.
You're cheating. You're cheating. You know, you just figured out the game before I did. So I was mad.
I mean, I did, but I was too stupid to realize what I had done. At any rate, I'm a little nervous because I feel like I'm kind of in too many dynasties that I've already like promised. And like I do want to do one with our message board because I like most of those guys. I think it would be fun to hang out and have that. But we're talking like 4 and like I gotta like friendships, a relationship to maintain. I don't know. I can do 4 dynasties here.
Biggest day for you since when that video game hits your platform?
Oh God. I mean, I've taken some fun trips that I've been excited about and hung out with my friends. But I did already kind of book out like that weekend. Like, hey, I'm off the grid. Don't call me. Don't like. I know you want these reviews. You will get that at a later point in time. It will not be that first weekend, dude. It's exciting. Like, and I know people who maybe video games aren't your thing. Maybe you don't have time to make them your thing. But this is something that this is a big deal. This is a really big deal.
Like from age 9, whether it was Triple Play 95 was one of the first games, or Tecmo Super Bowl, like the one they released in 95, I think it was the first NFL game with free agency. You could sim a season, free agents, go to the next year. Like doing that, like there was a game called Baseball Mogul.
Oh, yeah.
I lived for that stuff. Like, and all the football games, Madden. There was NFL Fever, I believe was back in the day. I kind of went the opposite route. Like everyone loved Madden. I went with the NFL Fever for a couple of years. NBA Live.
Like NFL 2K. There was a 2K NFL.
So all of those, like I was so into those. So like I get it. It's just I'm at a different point in my life where if I played video games, I probably wouldn't be married for too much longer. But I get the appeal, especially in the college game with recruiting and all that stuff. It'd be a lot of fun, especially do they got NIL involved in all this?
The transfer portal is involved. I don't know what else is involved. I say it's a big deal. Like for a lot of people, it's not, right? But there's a generation of us that are jazzed about this. And also, imagine I talked to JC Davis about this. Like, dude, you were going to go to a D3 school to play defensive line out of high school. He's a COVID kid, didn't have any interest. He ended up the JUCO route. And we now see, I was like, now you're in a video game. Like, you're getting money. You're getting like $600 and a free copy of this game. He said, and my friends and family are going to be everywhere. Like, that's you. That's who you are. And there's going to be players who are going to be like, I'm not rated high enough. And like, it's going to be fun to watch those social media conversations. I do want to ask you, I know the basketball answer is Coleman Hawkins easily. Yeah. Like, which player on the football team is your likely, like Keith Randolph would have been the last year's no doubter to go on there and be like, I am not ranked high enough, to throw a little bit of a Twitter fight there.
Ooh, for the football.
And that's not to say like someone who I think is going to be ranked low, but you know how some of these guys are. Like they're very vocal about themselves and think they should be higher.
Xavier Scott would be high on my list.
But he's quiet. Like I can't see him taking to Twitter and being like, hey, this is ridiculous. I've not seen that Twitter activity out of him.
Maybe the Twitter activity, but
that's what I'm saying. That's what I mean. Like the guy who's going to make it fun on Twitter and go up there and be like, no, this is bad.
Of the guys who deserve to do that, it'd be Pat Bryant.
Yeah, that's good. I'm
sure there's guys that are like ready to break out. Like we haven't done it quite yet. They're like, oh, this is crap. I'm a 68. Like it's like, well, you haven't played. So, Pat Bryant, I can see being like a 77, and he should be like an 80 or something. He'd be pissed off about it.
That's a good one, and he's like vocal enough, has fun enough to go on and do that and have that. Like Keith would have been that guy for me. There's no doubt in my mind. Keith Randolph Keith could have been in 96 and he would have been on there like this is unbelievable.
Johnny, certainly. I think Johnny. Yeah, right. Why 999 on this?
I like the Pat Bryant pick. That's a good one. Let's see if he does. Let's see if he does that.
Josh Kreutz, I'd love to see it. Sneaky one.
I'd rather see it on Twitter than Josh Kreutz staring into your soul. Like if you're an NCAA developer.
I don't know the last time Josh actually tweeted, but
what a return!
I could see him simmering over that. That's for sure.
Oh, what an outstanding way to come back to Twitter. You know, like, hey, F you.
Do you think Bielema uses it as like motivation? Like, Gabe, they got you as a 79, bro. Like, I thought you were an NFL player after 3 years. What's going on here?
I don't, because I would be hard pressed to think Brett Bielema is going to know one single. he's pretty in tune with stuff. Like he actually does pay attention to more.
He watches everything. He knows everything. I don't know how he's got enough time in the day to do all of it, but
I don't know. Maybe I just question how much he would really like. He might know, but I just wonder if he'd be like, that's stupid. I don't care about that. He's certainly going to quote tweet like, here are the top 10 ranked players in the game, and be like, what? Where are my guys? Like, there's almost 100% chance he's going to do that.
What could be the emojis? What are the emojis? Like shrug emoji, football. Orange diamond, football, shrug emoji.
Yeah. We've probably got a little too much time on our hands if we've learned the Brett Bielema Twitter, the order of and emoji.
5 in a row, right? And 3 of them are shrug emojis with orange.
And really the ones you want to pay attention to are the ones tucked in the middle. Yeah. Those are the ones that like, this is what he's feeling. Everything else is some noise around it.
Have we seen like a clown one in there? We might have been the subject of some of those. I don't know, but.
Oh, I think we've seen a clown. There's a pretty high likelihood that he's on there batting for his dudes about that.
If there was a coach ranking, Bielema certainly would tweet about it, wouldn't he?
I have no doubt in my mind that he would have some thoughts on that.
Yeah.
He would probably just, it might even be a picture of like Big Ten championship rings or something. There would be some sort of like tie to what he's done, which is admittedly quite a bit in college football.
Shrug emojis, 3 ring emojis, blue diamond, orange diamond, shrug emoji. That's it. That's all we're going to say on this podcast from now on is the shrug emojis. What Bielema emojis would we go out with? All right. That'll do it for us. Thank you, Joey.
Oh, God. Thanks, man.
Appreciate everybody listening to the Illini Inquirer podcast. Give us a follow, rating, review wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, hello. Give us the like button. Hit that like button. Follow us. Hit the notifications bell. We appreciate when you guys do that. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you next time right here on the Illini Inquirer podcast.